Welcome to another thrilling episode of Conversations for Good with Corinne and Briggs. And I just had to hit record. We were on our pre-call conversation. I'm like, this is so good. We just have to hit record. So Briggs, welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's so nice to be welcomed back. I so enjoy these conversations with you and can't wait to hear what we have to say today.
Me too. So one of our episodes, we record on Tuesdays and our episodes come out on Tuesdays. So we both listened to an episode of Conversations for Good with Corinne and Briggs that came out today. And we're like, that was a good episode. We're
We
gonna
are really smart.
I did say that. I was like, we sound smart. And I'm like, so maybe we hit record so people can hear how unsmart we
We
sound
actually are.
at times.
Right. Yes. Because I was saying that we do a lot of theorizing on
We
life and
do.
coming up with philosophies that make sense for our
us.
existences. Yeah, for us, right? And then it's fun to share them and then see what people have to say. Sometimes it resonates, sometimes it's just me.
Exactly. But you know what? As long as we are having fun, that is all that matters.
I
Okay.
think so.
So speaking of super fun, we
Mhm.
thought it would be fun and a little bit enlightening to share with you all how getting organized has changed each of our lives because we each have a different story. And what I think is endlessly fascinating is that in many ways we've ended up in the same place, right? We went to the same grad school. We are both wink. We don't need to say what it is in this episode. And we're running this company, and yet we are not the same when it comes to being organized, and we have different thresholds. We have different thoughts around it. So just to like the TLDR, just to spoil the the main point here, I am more naturally organized and Briggs does not necessarily consider herself so, but it's so fascinating for me to see that because she's so high performing and she is so on top of everything in her life and yet doesn't think about being organized the way I do. So it has been endlessly helpful as we created and set up the G&G home organizing membership in particular to always get Briggs's vantage point because then we've got like okay, the vantage point of how would someone who's naturally organized look at this, but how would someone who isn't? And so with that sort of as the context of this conversation, we thought it would be fun to talk about how getting organized has impacted each of our lives. And we're going to do it kind of interview style or that's the plan. And then we're probably just going to go off the rails and talk about who knows what. So before we jump into the questions, Briggs, do you have anything else to share to contextualize the conversation?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And honestly, I didn't really realize that I wasn't organized or that there were variations on personalities that some were and some weren't. It just that didn't cross my mind until I started working with you. Um, and part of that is just because it's like the ways in which I am quote unquote high performing are when other people tell me what to do, right? I got the syllabus, I follow the syllabus, I've got my job, I got these tasks I need to complete. Great. But in my own home, I'm in charge. And I didn't know I had the or needed to do anything above and beyond what just, I don't know, came naturally. I didn't put any thought into it at all. And I think I got away with it for so long before I had kids because I don't have that much stuff. We've talked about that. Like I don't like to buy stuff too much and I really don't like spending money. And so my house was just fine because I didn't have that many things that I would move around or need to find a place for, etc.
Oh, it's such a good point. Such
Yeah,
a good point.
thanks.
Especially because I have a lot of stuff I used to love stuff. I don't think we've actually ever talked about this specific point of it
Right.
because I am naturally organized, but I also had so much stuff, which I've shared before. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, thanks. I think it does make a difference. And I also feel like, let me know if you agree, that you have a greater locus of control than I do.
Probably.
Not in comparison to me, but I just generally I think you have a strong one. Like I think you recognize how in control you are of your life and the decisions that can or cannot be made, and making things happen from scratch much more than I do. I'm doing my thing every day. This is what I'm doing today. Oh, I could do more. Oh yeah, it doesn't like occur to me until I've lived with you via Voxer and Zoom for the last 6 or 7 years. Like, wow, I have agency and can make things actually happen for my life beyond what I'm told to do.
Mm, I love this. This is so interesting because, and so that's sort of what I've been able to gift you. And it's so fascinating to me because I think a lot of times when we see other people who are high performers, we just assume that they're the same as us. And I remember when we were in grad school, I came over to your apartment once and we were talking about a paper that was due. I think it was due the next day. And I was like, oh, I got to go write this paper. And you were like, what? It's not done? I'm like, wait, what? And you were like, I've been done with that for like a week. And it blew my freaking mind because you are not a procrastinator, which is one piece of it, but you're also not a perfectionist. So for me, part of the reason I procrastinated was because it's never done, because it's never perfect enough. And so it takes as much time to do something as time you have to do it. And I felt like if I started earlier, I was just going to keep working on it, working on it, working on it to make it more perfect. And it was never actually going to be done. And you were like, what? Just do it and get it done. And that really blew my freaking mind also.
Yeah, right. The ways in which we operate
Yes.
separately. Yeah.
Right, that you can
No,
be so high performing and not be a perfectionist, and you can decide when something is done. Because it's interesting, you were talking about how I do feel like I have a lot of agency. You
yeah,
do too, just in different places, right?
true. That's true. I think if someone else sets up the parameters for my agency, then I can operate within that quite clearly. But I think coming up with my own direction has come to me later, at least, than, I don't know, some people. Maybe earlier than others. I don't know. But
Interesting. So with that as the
yeah.
context and for people understanding where we're coming from, I think this is gonna be super interesting to share. So, Briggs, I mean, you so the first question is what was your starting point? So we've talked about this a little bit and contextualizing it, but like as you think about your organizing journey, as we're talking about it as pertains to like living in our current homes with our husbands and our 2 kids, what was your starting point?
Definitely a conversation with Corinne. Because again, I didn't think about any of this stuff. I just had things in places. And this was after I had had 2 kids by the time we started talking about it. And it was working out okay because they were pretty young. So I had my own stuff for them, but they didn't have their own stuff yet. Right. I think that's when they get into toddler age and then they're moving things everywhere and their agenda is to make as big of a mess as possible and your agenda is to clean things up and they don't understand you at all. Like, why are all these things going in this one place? That's boring. I want this over there. I want to see how far I can throw this, like neither of us agree on it. I mean, we didn't agree on anything when they were toddlers, but anyway. um and we were talking about being organized, and it again was like, oh, I could be more organized. And I didn't know the first thing to do. And I thought the exact thing that everyone thinks, which is to buy some bins. But the bin I thought of, because I'm like, well, I'm living my life just fine. I don't know what else could be done. Maybe I need a bin that helps like bring things up from one floor to the next floor. I need one of these, you know, if I'm bringing things upstairs and I don't have time, I'll put it in this bin. So I was like, oh, that's a smart idea. I've never had one of these. I could go get one. I ask you, and you're like, what? Don't do that. There's just one more thing you're going to have in your house. Like, just every time you go up the stairs, bring with you all the things that are at the bottom of the stairs. And again, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. I never would have thought to do that. I just had piles of stuff down there, and I don't know what it was like. Future Briggs will handle that. Like, when did I think this was going to take place? I didn't have a plan. It wasn't like, oh, Friday afternoons, that's when I bring things upstairs. It just, I think at a certain point you couldn't walk up the stairs anymore. Or I don't know. And then you just bring things. Um, so that, yeah, boggled my mind. Like, oh, it's a matter of like having a system and consistently sticking to a system that much more than just having a bin. Go ahead.
Yeah, so let's pause on that for a minute, which is I'm going to leave this for my future self because I think we are so well intended. It's so well intentioned, right? Like my future self is going to do this, but without a plan to support our future self in doing that. Whereas I have sort of the exact opposite philosophy, which is what I had shared with you in that moment, which is not why put off till tomorrow what you could do today, but why put off for one more second what you could do right this very second right now? Like, why put it off? Just do it right now. Just get it done. And then it doesn't hang over your head. And then it just doesn't accumulate into a million different things to do.
And isn't that interesting that that is the opposite way that you approach papers and that I approached papers? Because I would get that done right away with that philosophy. But then for organizing, I'm like, I don't know, just do it at some other point. Like, there's there's some deeper lessons to be
There
learned.
is, which we could and so on the one hand, don't listen to anything we're saying right now because we make no sense. Or on the other hand, we complement each other so
So
well that
well.
it makes for one complete, cohesive, well thought out plan. But now for anyone listening, you can understand why Briggs's perspective coupled with mine has been so helpful for creating such successful programming because we've recognized that, people, they always say, we're all the same. We're actually not all the same. We don't actually think about things in the same way. We really don't. And so being able to tease out, okay, if you come by my a thought process like mine naturally, here are the exact steps you have to take. If you don't, you need some like context and you need some pre-steps to get there. And so that's why if you've tried getting organized in the past and it hasn't worked for you, are you learning from someone who really understands where you're coming from? So, anything else to talk about for your starting point, or should I get into mine?
I
You know
think
what I
that's
think might
good.
be interesting? What
Yes.
does share your sort of husband's thinking, thought process, philosophy, his starting point around being organized as well might be interesting.
Yeah, so he has even less stuff than me. He could care less about money. He could care less about buying stuff. He could care less about where the things are. He just wants to do science, be sciency, and then watch some television. So I don't think he has any real thoughts or philosophy around it. Like I do all of the, I've gone through the membership myself, right? As I would listen to and watch all the videos when you were making them. I was editing them and writing the descriptions for them and all this stuff. So I was doing it while I was doing that work. And so our house has gotten to this amazing place of, things are all where they need to be. And I have a system and a routine for all the stuff. And he just sort of seamlessly fits into all of that. Um, but it hasn't, yeah, I'm not saying it's a bumpless road
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
he's like, great, I would love to do this for you. But
Right.
also, I'm very much in charge. And
Yes.
he's,
She's very much in charge, ladies. I love it.
yeah. And for the most part, he just, stays out of my way, slash, helps out in the ways that make sense.
Okay. And we're going to get into the benefits to our partners and kids a little bit later, but I think it's interesting for people to hear that starting point. So I'll speak more briefly because everyone probably knows at this point that I do consider myself naturally organized. I think I have very strong executive functioning skills. I am not a procrastinator when it comes to things that I'm not going to get graded on and that don't require anyone's external judgment. Those things I work on very quickly. But I had too much stuff, which is so interesting now because I have such an aversion to too much stuff. Now I have such an aversion to shopping that it's hard to even think back to that version of myself that really just had a lot of stuff in every category in my house. But I had too much stuff, but also very much valued being organized. It was my number one form of stress relief. I do think very systematically. So I knew how important it was. I didn't realize for me that the missing piece was having too much stuff. And then as far as my hubby goes, he also has less stuff than me. He's just much more laid back. So disorganization or clutter doesn't bother him. Like I don't even think he notices it or didn't back then. But he's got his own areas where he's super organized. So he works in finance. So anything finance related, anything relating to a spreadsheet, he's got his very strong systems and organizing techniques for that stuff. When it comes to our physical space, just again, not messy. He's not a messy person by nature, but just I just don't think thought about it much. But again, because he didn't have too much stuff, it was never an issue. Although I do remember telling him before we got engaged, do not propose to me if you ever want to live in a messy house or think that I will cook you one meal. Because neither of those things are going to happen. I am not the woman for you.
And I think it is very cool that you knew that about yourself at that age, right? Because I thought, oh, marriage, I'm going to be a completely different person. Who knows what'll happen? Again, didn't have that like agency. So I was like, we'll see. Maybe I will become a person who likes to, because I also don't cook very much. I don't hate it, but I don't do very much. And I didn't, think about what our house would look like, We did the basics. Do you want kids? Yes, me too. Okay, great.
Cool.
Let's
Let's
get
do
married.
it. Let's get married. Let's do it.
Why
And
not?
look at you now. Look how well it's all worked out. I love
That's
it.
right.
I
It
love
is
it.
great. It is great.
Okay, so maybe this is sort of a weird question because I think both of us it's the same answer around like using the techniques in the membership, but what was your process to getting organized?
Yeah, so I did, yeah, and definitely use the process that you set up in the membership. And that's the nice thing about having that s- for you is that you have the um, process decided for you, right? You don't have to think about, well, what should I do first? I don't even know. I'm going to buy a bin for my stairway, like that's not really going to get you there. And especially that was the only step I had in place. I didn't think about, well, then what next? I didn't have any direction. Um, so this idea that you kept mentioning at the time is how important purging was, right? And how you need to get rid of the things. And I thought, well, that makes a lot of sense, but also that's really not any fun.
No, it's not. Yeah.
So starting out with the hardest part is what is hard about
Mhm.
organizing, I think.
Yes.
There's so many other processes in the world that you can start with something more fun, or the whole
Yeah.
thing is kind of equally hard or easy or combination of that. But with organizing, the first step is the hardest, least fun,
Mm.
sentimentally difficult
Yeah.
in some places,
Yeah.
and I think we all struggle because of that.
It's a
Because it
great point.
yeah,
Yep.
it does get more fun after that,
It
right? When you
does.
see how beautiful your storage space now looks, or
Right.
not, maybe beautiful is the wrong word, but less
I think you could have a beautiful
disastrous.
storage space. Right. No, but it's so true.
Mhm.
Yeah, because the bins and the labels, that's the very last step. And you don't get to do the shopping, you don't get to do the containerizing, you don't get to do the labeling until later on in the process. Yeah, it's a great point. You know what is I'm also finding super interesting? You'd think this is like it's like as if we've never talked about this before. I think it's been a very, very long time though that we've had a conversation about this because started the membership. I mean, I went through the process. So the membership started in January of 2020. So I had been through the process a couple years prior to that. And you were probably watching the videos in 2020. So it's been a long time since we've really discussed this in great detail. But what I'm finding so interesting about what you're saying is you came at this with not having a lot of stuff. I came at this with having a lot of stuff and yet purging for both of us was the biggest thing that really got us started and really impacted our lives. So it's like no matter how much or how little you have more stuff than you need and that you're using and getting rid of that really is a huge game changer.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, right, and I think part of it is because I didn't have that much stuff, I had plenty of space, so then I
Mm,
didn't have the need to get rid of things
interesting. Yeah.
without the being told that it would be better. So what I did though is I think I started um on the with so no, so yeah, so the process in the membership is you first get your mindset situated, right? Because that does really matter, and the mindset will impacts all the things down the line, and then you purge, and then you organize, and then you reset, right? And what I purged first was that all of the bottles and pumping materials that I had. It was just in a pile in my near my sink because it makes sense, right, for it to be there. But I didn't use but about half of it, and I didn't think it was I didn't like it there because it looked terrible, just piles of stuff. But I didn't think about, well, what could I do with this? What would be better? I didn't take the time to think about what I could even do with it. And then the membership's like purge stuff. Oh yeah, okay, great. Let's be ruthless and actually get rid of the things I'm not going to use. And I still had that mindset shift that I needed, which was, well, what if I need it one day? I should keep it just in case. But then I remember this one bottle that I'd never ever used and kept for several years probably because I thought, well, everyone else liked it. Right, one of these days, I'm gonna finally realize how great it was, and then I never did. So I got rid of that and a bunch of other things, and I moved all of it into a bin in downstairs. I wasn't using most of it on a daily basis, right? Like, why have things on my counter that I'm not using on a daily basis? That doesn't make sense, but again, I hadn't thought of it. So that was a really big difference for me because now the space looks beautiful. I realize I can be in control of how my space looks. What's next?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And there's so much mindset work that we do both in terms of bringing that awareness and intentionality to it, but then in each step of the process, there are things that crop up, like, what if I need this, or how much money I've spent on it. And so we do work through those. Well, do you want to be someone who lives a life of what if, and thinking about the cost of keeping things, right? The cost of the space it's taking up on your counter for those bottles, and the cost of frustration at not looking neat. It's not a zero sum game where there's no cost to keeping these things. We just, the money's already been spent. We just got to let these things go for the life that we want. So, yeah, I love all that. Friend, I am doing something so fun, and this is your exclusive invitation to it. Starting on January 7th, I am running a totally free boot camp in a closed Facebook group. I haven't done something like this in years. We're going to spend 1 week together jump-starting our organizing for 2025. I am so excited to spend the week with you. The link to join this private exclusive Facebook group will be in the show notes. Click the link, join the group, and I am so excited to spend this week with you.
The big thing is that getting your mindset around being able to get rid of some things, um, and then doing it.
Yeah, it's so true. So I don't want to or like sort of gloss over all of the work that it took to get there, but that's not really what this episode is about. We're not actually talking about the work. We're going to be talking about sort of the after effect. But, I do think it's important to acknowledge, and you've already mentioned this a few times, that it is hard work, right? We both I really did spend a year going through it. Our members, spend a year going through it. We've had members who have been in for years and years because they're constantly either refining their systems, want continued support, or frankly didn't get to all of it in the first year. And that's okay, right? Because this is our lives. This is not a race to the finish line. It really does take time, but the more you do it, the easier it gets and the more fun it gets. And then you get these spaces that are dialed in and they look beautiful, and you do have the bins and you have the labels, and then it feels so fun.
Yeah, it really does. And like you say, I think having a beautiful space helps you keep it organized too, which is, I think, a great point. But I have a story about that along the lines of like refining. So my pantry, I remember someone had asked you in the membership about pantries, like, because they saw you with your bins and each bin had a label, and they were saying, my, do you buy the same exact food every week then? Because I'm buying who knows what every week. And so I wouldn't be able to fit everything into these bins on a consistent basis. And you said, well, sometimes there's a little bit more overflow in one of the bins or something, but then, we'll eat it and go through it and then it'll all fit back there again. And I remember feeling that way about my pantry too. Like I have no idea what I'm even buying. And so I can't put things, I don't even know what I'd label stuff, I don't know whatever. So, but I still went through the process of purging all the overdue items, right? The stuff I was never going to eat, brought everything to the donation center, and had a relatively well laid out pantry. And I did not buy bins though, because I didn't trust myself. So I found bins around the house, little, plastic bin, whatever, put them up, had that there. And I kind of labeled them just as with little stickies. And I thought, I'll just see how this goes. And then after really a year, I was like, actually, that worked out really well. I don't buy that much random things that don't fit. And I'm never going to be, I do relatively consistently buy the same foods, which I hadn't noticed before that.
Right. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I try to buy something new that I've never tried at least once a month.
Ooh, I
Yeah.
love
But
that.
thanks. Yeah, that's kind of fun just to
That
see.
is
And if you hate it,
fun.
you throw it away. Maybe it's your next best favorite, your favorite thing. You never know,
You're so
right?
fun. I love that.
Yeah. So try that.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I'm not buying
Right.
18 types of grains
Varieties
one
of
week,
right. Right.
and then no cereal or whatever. It's all kind of, roughly the same. Um, yeah. So then I decided the next year when the membership came back to January, we were back on kitchens. I was like, I now see that I don't buy that many things that won't fit into bins. So I'm going to invest in bins. So then I upgraded, and it turned out to be that what I had labeled those white plastic bins with the sticky note was exactly what I labeled
Mm,
the beautiful bins that I bought at a container store too,
love
but
it.
I didn't
Yeah.
want to invest. It's a lot of money, and you
It
don't want to
is.
invest it
Yeah.
all unless you're like, sure, this is what I want. So I did. I bought all the bins, spent the money, and it's been there for the last, whatever, 2 or 3 years. And I love them. I have no plan to change them. Right. Like and now, of course, I wish I had it the year prior too, because then I would have had this extra year of this beautiful pantry that
Live and
works
learn.
great for us.
I love it.
Hmm.
And, obviously we're not gonna, like, be talking too specific about kitchens right now, that's not the point of this, but I do think, it's important to remember that when you have broad categories, first of all, then they really do stand the test of time. But also, if you think about your containers are meant to contain. So for us, when we do our grocery shop on Saturday or Sunday, 1 day a week, we're looking at what we need more of, and if our snack bin, for example, is still 3/4 full, we're not gonna buy maybe we're gonna buy 1/4 worth of snack to actually fill it, but we're not gonna buy what I would buy the week because my kids don't eat the same amount of snacks week after week, right? So it really is looking at what do you actually need so that you're not buying more than your containers can comfortably hold. And I think going through this process and having the containers and the labels, you really start bringing more awareness to your habits, and then you're like, "Okay, what's working for me and, what's not working so well
Yeah,
for me?"
right.
Yeah,
Because I think something that people fall into is, say, like with paper towels, you're running low in one area, but you think I probably have more elsewhere. So then you don't buy more, and
right.
then actually you don't, or
Mhm.
you just can't find them. And then you're stuck
Yep.
in this place of having to run out the last minute and buy more paper towels.
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. So my process for getting organized was I had hit rock bottom. I've shared the story many times where I just was like, This cannot possibly be as good as it gets." And I went on this process for a year. My kids were very little. I was working full time outside the home. I didn't have a ton of time, but I was like, I cannot live like this anymore. And really started going through room by room and doing it ruthlessly, because I also decided I wanted this to be the one time I was gonna do it, and I wanted it to be for good, and it was. And then from that, I created the membership. So the membership in its current iteration looks very similar to the process that I put myself through, and obviously what you put yourself through, because you did do the exact membership. So, wait, before I forget, because you had mentioned this, and then it went out of my head and now it came back in. Do you know how many square feet your house is?
Yes, it's 2,400.
Okay. So I think that's
Mhm.
super interesting because you said
Mhm.
earlier you have plenty of space.
Mhm. I
So I
still do.
just I just want everyone listening to hear that. Briggs is saying she has plenty of space and she lives in a 2,400 square foot house, which is not a small house, but it is not a huge house. And I think a lot of people just think, if I just had more space, then I could live organized like Briggs or Corinne. And it is not the square footage, because my house is probably twice your square footage. And I also have plenty of space. I have empty closets and empty cabinets, but I just think it's important, because a lot of times I show my house all the time in the membership and on Instagram, and I do have a big home, but it's not about that, right? It's having the amount of stuff that your home could keep. And so I just want people listening to hear that Briggs lives in a 2,400 square foot home and has plenty of space, and even more space now that she purged. I think it's just such an important point.
Yes, thanks, and no garage.
And she has no garage. No, it's so important.
It is, I wish I had a garage for so
Right.
many reasons, but yeah, I have no garage. Like, when the kids had strollers and all that kinda stuff, it was in our dining room, we had no place to put them that made any sense, we don't have a mudroom, and so we just made this little partitioned part of our dining room to, have them sit there, so,
No
yeah.
dining room. I mean, sorry, no mudroom, no garage, and plenty. And your kids play sports. I mean, I know swimming is their big thing, which doesn't require a lot of equipment, but they play soccer. They do. So it's not like you still got all the categories of things, and you've got plenty of space. So I think it's so helpful for anyone listening who's just thinking, if only I had a bigger house or only I had more space. We don't have to wait for that. I always say this is the gift we give ourselves, not the gift we give our house. So even if you are in a temporary house, it's not your forever home. You still deserve to live an organized home in whatever size space you're in, but more square footage is not the answer. Okay. So now we've both gotten totally organized. What has been the biggest surprise to you since living the organized life?
Yeah, so I think it is the one thing that you talk about a lot, which is how little time it takes now
Mm,
to get everything back
yes.
to its place. So we talk about the Sunday reset. There's also the daily reset. You can do a monthly reset. There's a variety of you can do all of them, whatever works for your family. But we do tend to engage in a Sunday reset, and it doesn't take that long because we don't have too much stuff to do. Everyone knows what they're supposed to do. Everyone knows where everything goes, right? It's just like You just set a timer or whatever strategy you'd want, and they do it. I do it. The house is tidy. Start the week off on the right foot. Um, but you just don't. It's hard to see that you could get there until you do.
It's so true. Yeah. I mean, I wrote these questions, but didn't think of the answers before we started talking. It's not like I had an answer.
Right.
And I think that is the perfect answer is how little time maintenance takes. So people come into my house all the time and they're like, "Oh my gosh, especially like um my kids' friends. They're like, "Your house is so organized." I'm like, "They know I'm an organizer, right?" But it's like it's not hard to keep it that way. But I will come up with I'll share another thing since you already took that one, which I think is the best one. And I know you can relate to this also, which
Yeah.
is how much more free time I have
Yeah.
now
Mhm.
because we've eliminated pain points and because maintenance takes so much less time than you would think. I am surprised. And I shouldn't be surprised because the whole freaking point of all of this was to be less frustrated and to have more time and energy.
Right.
And still working on the energy piece, but that's like some hormonal stuff I've got going on. So I'm gonna like give myself a pass on that.
That's another episode.
It's another episode. We're gonna do a follow-up on that because I have started my hormone replacement therapy for so, like, yeah, we'll
Oh,
get into
yeah.
that another time, but
Yeah.
it is how much more free time, and again, and you and I have talked about this on here, and I've talked about it separately, it's something I still struggle to figure out exactly how to fill because I don't wanna be productive with that time. I just want it to be free, and so we're working on that again. We won't talk about that here, but that to me has been the biggest surprise. Even though, like I said, it was the whole freaking point, it's still a surprise at how much free time I still have. And a part of that too has been setting the more organized I've been, the more clear I've been on my boundaries, the more I've said no to other things. So it's not just the elimination of pain points, it's other things I've gotten rid of in my life that also contribute to having more free time.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's really good. And I've also done that as well. Like, I don't want to just do more things because I want to do more things. So the way that I think about this is throughout I guess my 20s, it dawned on me that I would have a lull for a week, maybe 2 weeks where I wasn't constantly doing something. So then I'd fill it with a new responsibility instead of a new optional hobby. Right. So then now I've got this new responsibility on top of the other one so that when things got busier, now I have this extra responsibility that I signed up for back when I was bored and understimulated. And I thought, I should not keep doing this because then I'm going to get to this place where I have way too many responsibilities and I had to start quitting things that I don't want to have to quit, right? At whatever times, because I'm like just so very overwhelmed. So I realized at that point, and then over the course of time have decided like I don't, if I don't want to do the thing, I'm just going to say no. And I've had many people ask me to do things, to do volunteer work, to get different jobs. Like I've been, you know,
She's
people,
very
tr-
desirable,
it's
friends.
true. They've tried to pull me in, and I've said, I just can't do it. I could technically,
Right.
I would just then be stressed.
Yeah.
So I think that people think it's a good thing to say no, even if you can say yes. You don't have
Yes.
to say yes just because.
I agree. I love all that. Okay,
Yeah.
so we've touched on some of this already, but let's talk about some of the biggest benefits to ourselves, to our kids, to our partners, to our relationships from having gotten organized.
Yeah, well, I think that the nice thing is that the expectations are set, and I know when
Mhm.
we were talking about the kids episode, I was saying how I have very low expectations, but I do have some expectations, and like they know what to do, right? Everything is in a system. There is a routine. They can do those things. I do have to find ways to motivate them to do those things on their own. Otherwise, it is still me asking them to do this and that. Um, but it is better than it could otherwise be. And they know where their things are, so we don't lose as much stuff as we otherwise
Mm,
could, right?
mhm,
So
mhm.
there's still a rush out the door because again, I have like find, you know, let's go. Let's because it's like they'll open a book. I'm like, why are you
Ooh,
reading right now? It's time to go out like we need to leave in 2 minutes. Like, oh yeah, I forgot, I don't know.
love
But they're
that.
not looking for their stuff. They have their
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
It's not a matter of not being able to find something. It's a
Mhm.
matter of not staying focused on the fact that we need to leave the house. And that helps, I think. And it's nice for me too, because then I know it's not my fault that we're
Right.
stressed out. I have found everything here is here.
Yes.
Everything you need is here. It's not
Yeah.
that I am so disorganized that you can't find it. You're just not focusing on getting out the door.
I
That's my
just wanna
honest
say that
answer.
we have never been late getting out the door because my kids were reading a book they just opened. So I'm gonna give you a gold star for that one, even though that's besides the point. I
I
love
have
that.
this I
I
have a
love that for your
picture.
kids.
Thank you. I have a picture of my daughter in the entryway reading a book with her swimsuit on. Like, "What are we doing here? We gotta
I
go."
I actually think that's amazing. So she gets a free pass for that one.
Alright, fair enough,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Yeah. So similar oh no, not similar. I have very high expectations for myself, for my children, and for my husband.
Yeah.
I do. I know that about myself. I think it can be
Mhm.
hard, but I also, they say that people rise and fall to the expectations set for them. And so I just decided to set very high expectations to watch us all rise to the challenge. But to your point, the expectations are very clear and they are very specific. And so there is no ambiguity. And because of that, there are, I was going to say no fight. I mean, there really are no fights around getting things done, making your bed, putting things away. There are conversations and reminders, but there are no fights around it because nothing is a surprise. You know how you ask a kid something, you've asked them 500 times, they're like, wait, what? And you're like, why is this a surprise to you? We don't have to do that anymore. And similarly with my husband, I think it really has, um, eliminated friction points for us. And I can see for all of us. So I had shared in the beginning that, my husband was not organized. He just didn't care that much. But now he definitely sees the benefit to our lives. And he's even brought that into his workspace and into his work life. I've shared how he's, integrated some of the systems into his work. And I think all of us in our family enjoy to varying degrees the benefits of being organized for ourselves personally. So yes, interpersonally, right? It's less fights, it's less friction, but each of us individually knows our routine. It helps us set boundaries with ourselves. And this is like such a very specific example, but I would actually say that this is another answer to one of the surprises for me is I I was super uptight, wound super tight. I can be fun people too, but just like uptight. And the more organized we've gotten, the more laid back I have become because I'm just less stressed. There's less friction points. There's less things I need to control because everyone is doing their part. And so I am so much more laid back. So why am I mentioning this? So, um, my son, for example, he like the rules are you put your clothes in the hamper when they're dirty. We have a hamper in the laundry room. And most days after school, he has sports practice. So when it's cold, like it is now, he will take his sweatpants off. He will leave them on his floor and he will, go out to his sports activity. And there was a time there where I was like, why are those on his floor? Like, let me see what's going to happen. And I realized that when he gets home and he then hops in the shower, the clothes go in the hamper. So rather than having to nag him in that second, like, why are your sweatpants on the floor? I let it go because that's part of his routine right then. He takes them off, he leaves them there. Maybe he's going to put them back on when he gets back home if he doesn't shower right away because he's cold. Maybe he's not. But ultimately, they end up in the hamper where they need to go without a reminder. So it just, again, he's found. He knows what the expectation is, but it wasn't like you could never have clothing on your floor. Like, that's not what we said. It's just like the clothing need to go into the hamper. So I've gotten more relaxed. He's found a way that works for him, which again is not being super rigid. So, I mean, it's such a specific example, but we have those throughout the day in all areas of our lives where it looks like everyone adopting our rules in a way that works for them so that we're working as a family unit. Everyone's meeting expectations, but just not every second of every day, right? It's also within the confines of reality.
Yeah, yeah, that's great, that's great. And then the other thing that we neither of us mentioned as a benefit that to our families is how clean our houses are.
Yes,
Like
that
that you just kind of forget, like, "Oh, yeah, it doesn't need to be this, like, tidy," right? And
right.
so the kids have plenty of space on the floor to play whatever they wanna play because their floor isn't covered with
Yes.
toys,
Yep.
right? And not all the time, we are not 100%, and I know you like to clean up, but before you
As we
change rooms,
yep.
you clean up that room. We do
Yep.
not do that. It's like a weekly thing here,
Mhm.
but still, they don't have so much out that they can't walk around and whatever. So we are, right now, their bedroom floors are clear. They have nothing on them, and our
Yep.
cleanup day is Sunday. Today's Tuesday. Like, it's fine. It usually is fine.
Yep.
And I think that that is because we don't have that much stuff, because we have a system, and because we've got places for the things to go in, right? And you try to stick to a routine that works for you.
Yeah, I love that. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many. Another benefit for us that what you just said made me think of is I love to be a house that people want to pop in. I want
Oh
my
yeah.
kids to bring their friends home. I want people to be able to come over at any time, and they can. And I never have
Mhm.
to do anything, literally
Mhm.
nothing. People
Mhm.
can come over at any time that they want. And the house looks how I want it to be. It looks organized, it's welcoming for guests, it's comfortable. And that I didn't have that growing up. I didn't have a house that people could just pop into, and I
Mhm.
love that we've created that for ourselves. So,
Yeah. That's great.
um, we've talked a lot. So
Yeah, I
let
know. 40
yeah,
minutes.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's
we're good.
flown by.
It always does.
So let's as we head towards wrapping up, what words of encouragement would you share for anyone getting started, thinking specifically about someone coming from your vantage point of like just having not given it much thought,
Mhm.
and not feeling like, I mean, you're not disorganized by nature, but just have it never really came to you naturally because you just didn't really think about it. What words of
Yeah.
encouragement would you share?
Yeah, that's a good question to which I don't have a clear answer. I mean, I've talked to friends about it before.
Yeah.
I don't know how effective I've been though.
Interesting. Because they
You
haven't
know,
signed up for the membership.
I
So
I honestly, I really think that's probably the truth.
yeah.
Really, because I think, I've mentioned to them many of the things that you have said over the years. That's typically what I'll tell them, like what I mentioned already, like, oh, this is a good thing I think that I don't think we've said yet. If let's A lot of people worry about throwing something away that they want later,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
Accidentally throwing something away and like, oh
Yep.
shoot, I shouldn't have done that. Now I regret I have to buy it again, etc. But the thing is that if you're getting rid of, I don't know, 100 things, 200 things, we have on average, average household has 30,000 items in it in the
Insane.
United States. Yeah,
So
that's a little
insane.
too much stuff.
Yeah.
So you're getting rid of 100 things, 200 things, 300 things. You may have to buy one or two,
Mm,
but that the cost of that is so minimal compared to how good it feels to have all that stuff out of
mm,
your house. How I think it also, there's some pride in it, right? Like, I did
yeah.
that. Good for me,
Yeah.
right? So
Yep.
looking forward to this feelings of feeling proud of you accomplishing something that you didn't want to do and that no one is making you do, right? But you
Mhm.
did it anyway because it's for yourself.
I love it.
I think that might be my encouraging, motivating um, thought. Yeah, just because it is a lot of work. So it's hard to sit
Yep.
yourself down and do it. And you come up with roadblocks as you're going.
Mhm.
We all do.
We
So
do.
if you can ignore them all, join the G&G membership where we will help you get rid of those mind blocks, because that is the biggest part, I think, is the mindset issues. And then work through it step by step, knowing that in the end, it will absolutely make you feel better.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think that's amazing. And as we've said, it is hard work, but you are deserving of living in the house that you want to live in. You are deserving of having a happy, calm life. You deserve it all. And so you are worth putting in the work. If you've tried and failed in the past, because I know a lot of people have, there's nothing wrong with you. There was probably something wrong with the way you were going about it. It wasn't the right process. It wasn't the right system for you. There is a better way. So don't give up on yourself. And, you know, Briggs, you and I have talked about this offline so much, but a lot of this work with getting organized is about delayed gratification. There is immediate gratification in that you immediately feel better. You see yourself getting rid of stuff, but the big prize at the end takes some time and effort to get there. And so if you can delay that gratification a little bit and stick with it, you will be so amazed at what is available to you on the other side of it. And the other thing I will say is that for those of us who feel like this is just one more thing I have to do, or one more thing I have to ask my family to do, or my kids to do, or my partner to do, the benefits to them are endless. Like, we haven't even talked about like the independence that it gives our kids and the skills that it's teaching them. And I mean, we did talk about all the elimination of pain points, but there is so much good that comes out of it. I called this podcast Get Organized for Good. And for good has the dual meaning of, if you do it with my system, it's once and you never have to do it again, other than this easy maintenance. But it also is for the good life that you get on the other end of it. And you deserve that. But it does take work to get there. And just stick with it, because you are deserving of that incredible life available on the other side.